talk a little bit, I don't have long, and the political repercussions of climate change and global health are enormous. I could talk all day. And normally I do get to talk for much longer than the 8 minutes I've been assigned today. So we'll see how far we get through everything. I want to start with why is climate change political? And when I was thinking about it, really it's because of the global health implications and the global health consequences of climate change. Politics and politicians have existed in societies since we started organising ourselves into society. So since we ceased to be nomadic people wandering around and have landed in different areas, we have looked to people to organise and protect us, ultimately. That is what politics and politicians are ultimately for. Our health and global health are one of the most important things to protect. Without protection from disease, without our health, there isn't much else to worry about. If you think, even with a particularly bad cold, you tend to forget some of the other important things that are happening in life. Global health is what we need to protect, and we look to politicians for answers on that. And as we know, as Jeremy was saying, getting the groups together who need to work together on these issues is really very difficult. And as my global governance class will know, getting people to work together globally on any issue is very difficult. So what's the issue with climate change? Climate change, right from the start, it's an issue, it's a debate point. Not everybody agrees that global warming is happening. As Jeremy was saying, there's less and less people perhaps in the global warming isn't happening camp. But it's still a debate point. Some people will still tell you it is part of the natural cycle of the Earth's temperature change, and climate change will always happen. While this debate is raging about whether or not it is happening, it's causing health problems and it's causing political problems in all different ways. One of the main problems, as Alan touched on here, I was expecting Alan to be much more on tropical diseases and not encroach onto politics, and it did. But I can draw on that as well. We industrialised in the West. We made a mess. It was a dirty industrialisation. The West became clean, and we became slightly cleaner. The developing world want to do the same. Should we allow them to do so? Should we allow them to go through that process? This is something Alan was talking about. These countries want to become rich. Should we ask the poor not to do that? The Rio Declaration says states have, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of international law, the sovereign right to exploit their own resources pursuant to their own environmental and developmental policies. And that is the bit of that second principle that states tend to draw on. Now, the second half does say they also have the responsibility to ensure that activities within their jurisdiction or control do not cause damage to the environment of other states and of areas beyond the limits of jurisdiction. However, that is very difficult to enforce. It is difficult to see where pollution is coming from. It is difficult, once something is in the atmosphere, to assign a guilty party to that. So the first half of that principle tends to be drawn on more than the second. The fact that states have the sovereign right to make as much of a mess of their own country as they want. Now, to what extent should we allow that? Basically, global problems require global solutions. We can't allow nation states to act on their own, and why not? It can't be solved nationally. And why? Because disease, pollution, carbon emissions, they don't see national state borders. Only human beings see national state borders. The diseases that are crossing borders do not. The pollution does not. Climate change does not see state borders. And the issues affect the whole of humanity. And without global responses, there will be no solution. Now, I don't have time to go into huge detail and everything, but I wanted to highlight what I think are the top 5 most important political repercussions of climate change and its global health problems. Now, one has to be food and water scarcity. Now, is that a political problem? Of course it's a political problem. We look to our politicians to ensure we have clean water. You expect, certainly in the developed world, here in Britain, to turn on the tap and that water be clean. Who do we ask to do that for us? We ask the politicians, be they here, actually at Westminster, or in the EU, in Brussels. We're looking to people to ensure that we can drink the water. Human beings can only live round about 2 days without water, and they can only live for 2 weeks or so without food. If water is polluted and food cannot be grown, the entire human population is in danger. And wars will be fought over the last cups of clean water. That is where it becomes even more political. Yes, we ask our politicians to ensure water is clean. We also will be descending into civil war, border war, over water and food production. Now, extreme weather is already a problem in the developed world and the developing world, but I think it's important here to emphasise that climate change is already having an impact on the developed world here, okay? Think about Hurricane Katrina. Think about the political repercussions of that, okay? The social and political impact was enormous. You're looking at almost civil war there over the effects of a hurricane, and it has still not been entirely cleared up. What responsibility do governments have to plan for disaster rather than simply to respond to disaster? This is a problem always with environmental issues. We respond a lot of the time rather than planning for it. How can you predict the unpredictable, though? Who should be responsible for that? Should we be looking to global bodies rather than national governments to plan and predict for the unpredictable? If we look to the UK, we have more and more annual flooding in the UK. I don't know how many people in this room have been flooded. My house was flooded. And the health issues related to that is unbelievable. It's a terrible thing. Who pays to fix it? Insurance companies are becoming more and more wary about insuring houses. To what extent do we rely on the government and rely on politicians to ensure that where we live is safe? We look to the Thames Barrier. Do we look to more sea wall building, flood defences, and the health issues? It's incredible. If we looked at outbreaks of disease, yes, there's outbreaks of disease following flooding and hurricanes. Temperatures rise, rain patterns change, people's houses are flooded with dirty water. Tropical diseases are moving into non-tropical areas. Lyme disease and dengue fever, that you mentioned, has spread into countries that have never seen it before. How do we treat the outbreaks? Should we be treating the outbreaks, or should we be treating the root of this problem, the core problem, which is the fact that the climate is changing, allowing these diseases to spread? Now, in developed and developing countries, there's another whole issue of respiratory diseases and pollution, okay? According to the World Health Organization, outdoor air pollution causes 1.3 million deaths worldwide per year, mostly among children. We're talking about going back 50 years in time. We already have done in certain aspects. Look at 1950s, the London smog case study. It's estimated in 1952, smog killed 6,000 people. That led to new regulations being put in place, and it demonstrated that people alone, on their own, cannot act to change air quality. It requires a coordinated response, be that nationally, or now that needs to be globally. The same pollutants that kill directly also lead to climate change. Nations alone cannot end this. We need to see an integrated response, as Jeremy and Alan have both discussed. Now, as Alan brought up, I would say migration. Migration leads on from each of the points I've made before. People will flee famine, they will flee drought, they will flee outbreaks of disease and flooding. Not all migrants are fleeing war and persecution. And no matter what the Daily Mail would tell you, not all of them are just coming over here to look for jobs and benefits. They're fleeing famine, drought, extreme weather. People are coming here to escape terrible things, not just war, but climate change effects. This isn't new. Think about the Irish potato famine, the 1800s, the Ethiopian famine in the 1980s. We've seen this before. This is only going to increase. The migration, global migration, cannot be dealt with by nation states acting alone. You can put up your borders, you can do what you like on your own state borders. That does not solve the core problem. Why are people leaving the place they really want to be? They don't want to be here, they want to be back at home, happily. They can't be if it is flooded, if they have no food, they have no water. So there's an increasing need for an integrated response to environmental migration. It's been illustrated by the recent European migrant crisis, and it's only going to change. So I'd like to finish by saying, is this the job of politicians? Do we ask our politicians to maintain our quality of life? Because this isn't something that's happening elsewhere. It's not something that's happening to other people. It's not something that's happening in the future, although you might want to think about your own children and their children. This is happening here. It's happening now, and it's happening to us.